Hi everybody, welcome to my second video on spear and shield use. Today we're going to be focusing on fighting in groups and the changes in technique that are necessary for fighting in groups. The first thing that changes between fighting one person and fighting a group of people is that your focus changes from controlling this central line, the central point of one enemy, to focusing on many enemies. So whereas when you're fighting one person, your weapons will be very close together, very kind of almost like a wedge. You're kind of keeping them in the center to defend yourself from this one point of attack. When you're fighting multiple opponents, the attacks are coming from wider angles at you. So you have to defend these wider angles. And you'll see in these next two clips, first one, I'll be fighting my friend George. And we've hopefully set an angle where you can see that we're both kind of really tight with our weapons. And then the second clip, we'll be fighting two people. Will be George and Hugh in the grey hoodie, who've helped me out with this video. Notice how in this clip I'm holding my shield and my spear further apart. I'm doing a lot of active defense with my spear against George's attacks, whilst using my shield to kind of defend against Hugh attacking me on the other side. So, since your angles are wider, this active use of the spear for defense becomes really important, because you can't always be defending yourself with your shield. At least not from every angle. So I'm going to go through some of the most common kind of active spear defenses that I find myself using when fighting in a line. And I've picked up a buckler instead of a full-size shield here to kind of hopefully help you see what's going on a bit more easily. So the first opening we're going to talk about is a high right opening. And defending this line of attack generally occurs after you've sent out a thrust at an enemy in front of you or to the left, which leaves your high right side open. So as the thrust or cut comes in towards your high right side, you rotate the spear in your arm so that the butt defends this line. When defending a low line, which would generally be a thrust to your thigh or your side, this normally happens after you've defended a high line. So your spear is already rotated upwards, and as the thrust comes in, you basically bring that haft back down to kind of hit away the spear point. And as you can see, it opens up quite nicely for a counter back at that opponent. So the last two examples were primarily using the back end of the spear, back end of the haft. In this one I'm going to show a technique using the front end of the spear, specifically here to redirect a thrust aimed at my chest. But you can use this kind of cutting motion with the end of the spear to in different ways to deflect shots coming in at you. So here we see I thrust at George on his shield side, which creates an opening in the center, which I then kind of spin my spear around his shield and redirect that thrust, and it creates a nice opening in the center for me to then thrust back at him. You can see it here from a different angle in the group fight. Here's a number of shots of a combination of the different techniques kind of used as and when I see they're needed, with George just sending in the attacks to me. From this angle you should kind of be able to see the angle that the attack's coming in from, kind of coming into my right side, as if I've attacked someone on George's right. You should be able to see also I'm kind of switching between a couched or semi-couched position and a regular underarm spear guard, which gives me the power to do those cuts that I was talking about. But yeah, they're very easy to quickly switch between that and your kind of regular grip with the spear. So here I'm going to talk about hooking and shield manipulation using your spear. A lot of people think this can kind of only be done with a two-handed spear, or when you've got like an actual hook on your weapon with something like a bill hook or something like that. But as you can see here, George is demonstrating, he's resisting with the shield here. And I'm using the little kind of edges of the spear to pull, and you don't get a strong hook, but you can open up avenues that wouldn't be there otherwise. Here's an example of how it would be used. Kind of pull open, bring your spear up, and you can take that center line. I like this one, it looks like a lot like some of the Greek vases you see. So obviously this kind of thing would be a bit easier if you had more prominent lugs on your spear, like a boar spear, or they sometimes call them boar spears, like a winged spear. You see those a lot throughout the Viking Age and the Anglo-Saxon period as well. You can also use your kind of couched position with the spear to give you extra strength in kind of levering open shields or manipulating their enemy's weapon, as I've talked about before. So one important thing that you have to bear in mind when you're doing group fighting is that whenever you make an attack against someone, you're going to be open from a different angle. So it's very important to know which angles you're going to open when you make certain attacks, so you can be ready to defend them. So here I'm going to show an example of this. George is going to do the demonstrating here. George holds his shield slightly to the left of center line, so his center is open. He knows that's what's open, and he knows that if someone goes for that, he can do this nice move here where he knocks my spear across to the right of the screen and moves over the top to thrust at my chest. Now, if he wanted to commit further, this is something you can use in one-on-one combat as well quite nicely. If he wanted to commit further, he could achieve what we call an overbind with the shields, where his weapons are on top of mine and I'm essentially defenseless. And if he were to strongly commit, you get something like this, which is a bit exaggerated. Here's just a couple more angles of that. Both me and George switching who's doing it. Now, these techniques won't always play out exactly the way that we've demonstrated them here, but the overall concepts remain the same. And you can see in this little clip, the angles are very different, but I still pull off essentially the same move with my shield against you. As you can imagine, it's quite tricky to practice these techniques on your own or with just one other person because the angles involved. So we've come up with a game that we call the triangle game, which I'm sure many other people have come up with a similar thing before, but this is our version. So basically how it works is you have three people set up in a triangle. everyone is against everyone, and if you get hit, you take a step back, acknowledge the hit, and just rejoin the fight. And what this does really effectively is teaches you how to use your peripheral vision to look at both left and right enemies and left and right angles of attack, and not just focus on the person in front of you, because in this case there is no one in front of you. It teaches you very effectively how to open up those lines of defense and use a lot of those techniques that we've demonstrated before in the video. So hopefully, if you keep your eyes open, you can see some of those techniques that we've just shown you. Another benefit of the triangle game is that it shows you, really reinforces to you where your openings are if you attack. So you'll notice, hopefully, in this footage that as soon as someone attacks, the other person is normally right there ready to take advantage of that opening they've just created. And that really forces you to use these techniques that we've been talking about so far in the video. It also shows how if you're manipulating someone's weapon or shield, you're exposing yourself, because if you hook someone else's weapon, you are in effect hooking your own weapon. So it teaches you to be wary of doing that and prepared for when someone attacks you if you're trying to do that. Now I'm going to take a little while to talk more specifically about how units can work of spearmen, and how best I think spearmen are used in a unit in terms of spacing, ranks, the composition of the unit itself, and coordination between people in the unit. First, we're going to talk about spacing. This is something a lot of people get wrong or don't think about, in my opinion, because if you're too close, you're in the way of each other and you can't fight properly. But if you're too far apart, you're not able to support each other properly. Another important aspect of unit composition is depth of ranks. Oftentimes you see in reenactments and LARP events, etc., people fight, they present all of their forces, all of their warriors on the front rank in one long line. Now, this obviously allows you to outflank your opponent if you've got more people, but what it means is that you don't have staying power. If the people in your front rank, in a section of your front rank, are injured or killed, there's no one behind them to replace them. So oftentimes it's good to have 2 or 3 ranks deep, at least. And historically, we have accounts of up to 16 ranks deep, or even more in some cases. And that's because once the front rank gets killed, you've got people behind them to replace them. You've got people behind them to support them. If they're not killed, just regularly in the fight. And you've got people there to kind of help push forward if need be. You've got weight of numbers in your block that way. So here I'm going to show what I consider to be the widest spacing that spearmen should fight at, which is about at spear length apart. So if need be, you can reach the person next to you with your spear. So if someone rushes them and tries to attack them, you can get them with your spear and support your teammate. Here I'm just going to move to show where the second rank would be here, and you kind of stagger the second rank so you get a zigzag line, and the second rank would be spaced the same as the front rank. So as you can see, I can dart in and out of this gap to support my teammates if need be. So here we demonstrate what I would describe as regular spacing, which is probably about an arm's length apart, which is the spacing that I think normally you should be aiming for. It gives everyone the room they need to fight still, while still being close enough to properly support each other. And the second rank can still kind of fit through that gap if they need to. And you'll notice actually that the regular spacing is about the same spacing as if the second rank stepped forward from wide spacing. So here we have very close or shield wall kind of type spacing, and you'll notice here, if you look at George, the awkwardness he's having with using his spear in the underarm position. So if we switch to overarm, you'll see that it's a lot more kind of maneuverable and easy for George to get his attacks in. And actually, funnily enough, this is how we see all of the spears being held in the Bayeux Tapestry, in these close shield wall kind of formations. And here I'm going to demonstrate even more clearly how, in a second rank, using underarm is almost impossible when your people are this close, when your spacing is this close. There's very little I can do, and there's very little to move. It's very awkward using this kind of formation. I don't think anyone did it on purpose, generally speaking. I think it happens in fights. People get crushed up like this. And I think that's why the overarm spear hold is very useful. So I'm going to talk about some of the teamwork that you can exploit in fighting in a line like this. One thing you can do is you can create openings for your teammates. So you can knock a spear aside or hold a weapon down using the end of your spear and open up that line of attack for one of your teammates. Alternatively, you can hook open a shield or feign high to get them to move their shield in a certain way, allowing your teammates to take advantage of that gap that you've created. Here George demonstrates a high thrust in order to get Hugh to move his shield, which opens up the centre line to my thrust. Another important skill that kind of follows on from the last one is not only do you create openings for your teammates, but you also make moves to defend them when you see strikes coming in against them. So what you can do, you might be able to knock up a spear thrust like George does here, out of the way, and defend me, or alternatively you could knock a spear thrust downwards. You can do a similar thing with a cut. You can position your spear in the way of it, or you can redirect it using a couch position. All of this is quite useful stuff and really improves your effectiveness as a unit. You can see us here discussing that knocking a spear upwards is easier and more effective than knocking a spear point downwards. However, both are useful in certain contexts. Now, I'm going to address something I see quite often at LARPs and reenactments, etc., which is putting the people with the spears in the second rank behind the people with the swords and the shields. And I think the thinking behind this is that once the lines contact each other, the spearman and the swordsman will both be able to attack because the spears can go over the shoulders of the swordsman. Now, this works in theory, but only if the lines contact at sword range. If one line has their spears in front and can contact at spear range, they will outreach the swordsman in the front rank and will be able to attack them with impunity, unless the swordsmen push in close, which is quite difficult to do. Anyone who's tried to encourage a lot of people to close that distance will know that it's very difficult to get people to do that. So that's why I generally think it's better to put your spears in the front and have people with swords in the second rank, because then if you do need to do that push and get close and get stuck in, the guys in the second rank can just come through and be that force and be that close distance attack that you need. So in these next two clips, we're trying to demonstrate the effectiveness of spears in a front rank versus swords in the front rank. This is quite difficult to do with only 3 people, so you have to forgive us if it's not super clear. But we're not rushing in. We're trying to simulate lines here, so it's very difficult to rush straight in with a line most of the time. So we're going to move backwards and forwards as a unit would do. So here you can see we've got 2 swordsmen kind of trying to push against the one spearman, and I did ask these guys to try and push as if they were in a line, so they're not rushing straight at me, because if they did that they would beat me. But as you can see, I completely outreach them, and I'm able to get hits off on them and kind of hold them back and deter them without them even getting a chance to get hit off on me at all. So here we've swapped, so I have the sword and they have the 2 spears, and they have the exact same brief, which is try and push into me like a line would. As you can see, I'm pretty hopeless at defending and get pushed off screen pretty much straight away. So we take it back, give it another go, and I really am trying to hold my ground here, but there's just no way. They outreach me and they get hits in, and there's nothing I can do. Here we're showing how someone with a sword in the second rank can be really useful to a line of spears, because if they do manage to get rushed by a swordsman or someone with a shorter weapon, the person in the second rank is immediately available to attack that person as they rush in. It also it basically deters people from rushing, because they can see that there's people there with shorter weapons ready for just them as they come in. And I think this is one of the potential uses of a Daneaxe as well. You sit behind the shield wall, or behind the front second rank of shields, front 2 ranks of shields or whatever, and if someone really pushes into that shield line, or a great group of people really push into that shield line, you're waiting there ready with your Daneaxe and you just hit them. So we've talked at length about being rushed as a spearman, and it is a significant risk. It's where you stand the least chance, but it's not the end of the world. And if you have supporting people in your second rank or your third rank, you can turtle up and you can be very defensive. So here Hugh is rushing me and trying to get me with his sword, and I'm demonstrating how I can defend, or how long I can defend with just the spear and the shield and hold my ground as best I can. The length of the spear haft and the width of the shield, if I hold it forwards, means that I'm actually really quite well protected, and it gives ample time for the people either side of me or behind me to come to my aid.
Huey does judo, you're fucked. Aww. Get it with the shoe.
You moved your hand.
Cool, so I'm going to go on the right of Julia.
He's like, that's not even the worst though, like, at least they're not going like, rolling. At least they're not going like, you know, like they still fight. Like, even that, like, they used to see it.
Too cool.
No, dude, you start out in normal clothes and you go like,